something that none of us, Terry Pat and I, saw when we ultimately got there. But thank you for your patience, and thank you for having me today. I want to just speak really briefly, because I really want to spend most of my time answering your questions. There's nothing more important in a president of the United States than character. Nothing. Not experience, not whatever positions they take on the issues. Nothing more important than character. And let me tell you why. Because no matter what we lay out here, what our plans are for the economy, what our plans are for education, what our plans are for immigration, what our plans are for foreign policy, none of it matters. None of the promises matter unless the person giving them is a person of character that you can believe in. It also doesn't matter because there will be things, for sure, that will come up for the next president that we couldn't possibly anticipate today. In 2000, I remember as George W. Bush's campaign lawyer in New Jersey that we talked about, imagine this, the budget surplus and how it was going to be spent. Al Gore talked about his lockbox, right? And remember, for those of us who remember back to those days, I'll tell you what nobody asked either Governor Bush or Vice President Gore. What if a group of 11 terrorists hijacked 4 767s out of Boston, Newark, and Washington, D.C., and flew them into the World Trade Center towers, the Pentagon, and attempted to fly them into the Capitol? No one asked them that. Yet, it became the defining moment of George W. Bush's presidency, and I, for one, was very glad that he was the man sitting there. Because whether we agree or disagree with every decision President Bush made, we knew from that moment that we had a man of character who would tell us the truth and would stand up for our country against every adversary. And so character is the first thing that matters when we pick a nominee and we pick a president. Second, if we live in a country that spends $400 billion a year on K-12 education, and 39% of our 8th graders can't read at grade level, and 25% of our 8th graders don't do math at grade level. This is not only an enormous threat to our economic future as a country. Worse yet, it's an enormous threat to our democracy. Because an uneducated populace cannot run a democracy. I've been fighting these fights on K-12 education since I showed up on the scene 14 years ago in New Jersey and had the temerity back then to actually speak out against the teachers' union. This has now become almost Republican gospel. But I was the one, I can still show you some of the bruises, who took on the teachers' union first and drove down their popularity in our state from the mid-'70s when I became governor to the 30s by the time I was 2 years into my term, because I went in town hall meetings from place to place in our state and said they put the worst of their members before the best for our children. And that is happening nationally now. We need a president who will radically change the K-12 education system in this country and have the guts to do it. Because if we don't, between that and what we did to our kids during COVID, we are going to have a generation of children who will not be able to function economically or from a civic perspective in our country. We can't have that. The last thing I'll say is this. $33 trillion in debt is a lot. It's more than we can comprehend. And I want you to understand something. Our last 2 presidents have accounted for 40% of our nation's debt. Donald Trump ran up $7.8 trillion in debt in 4 years. It is the greatest amount of debt that has ever been accumulated by a president in 4 years in this country's history. And Joe Biden, being the jealous type, is already at $5 trillion and would like to pass Trump in what I hope is his remaining year and a half. We have to get a handle on this, and no one else in this race other than me has ever dealt with anything even remotely like this. When I became governor of New Jersey, I inherited from a very liberal Democratic governor who I defeated, John Corzine, former CEO of Goldman Sachs, so in that job he knew a lot about debt, and he ran a lot of it up. And we had an $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget. And what we did was I went to zero-based budgeting. And what that means is every department in the state had to come in at zero and justify every dollar they proposed to spend to me. Not start at where they were last year and then go up from there. Start at zero. You know what that led us to do? We eliminated 683 individual programs in my first year and allowed us to balance the budget without raising taxes. Now, it's going to take every bit of 8 years as president to get a $2 trillion deficit under control, so we stop adding to a $33 trillion debt. But let me tell you, the interest rates we see today, where people can't afford to buy a home, buy a car, and the $1 trillion in debt service that we're going to be paying annually starting next year will bury our country. And we need a president not only can talk about it, but can do it. And by the way, we shouldn't be surprised that Donald Trump did that. I want to tell you why, because he did business in my state while I was governor. The only person who could bankrupt 3 casinos when we had a monopoly in New Jersey back then. It was New Jersey and Nevada. How could you not make money running a casino? I want you to think about that. 3 casinos went bankrupt under his management. And the last story that I'll tell you about that was what he said to me when I came in with that $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget. We were friends, and he picked up the phone and called me and said, "Hey, I read about that deficit, that's brutal." He said, "Let me tell you what to do." Believe me, at that moment, I would have taken suggestions from anybody. So I said, "Sure, Donald, what do you think?" And he said, "Go bankrupt." I said, "I'm sorry, you don't understand. The law prevents a state from going bankrupt." He goes, "Do it anyway." He said, "They'll sue you. By the time the case gets resolved in court 2 or 3 years later, everyone will have forgotten about it. And you'll be in good shape politically. Otherwise, you're going to have to make some really hard choices that are going to make people really hate you. And I want to see you do well." Should we be surprised that the guy who made that suggestion to me in 2010 is the guy who ran up $7.8 trillion in debt? Those are just 3 of the issues, but I want to go back to the first one. When we saw what happened in Washington, D.C. 2 nights ago, with a Republican speaker being kicked out of office, whether you love Kevin McCarthy or you hate Kevin McCarthy or you're somewhere in between, it shows that Republicans can't govern. And that's bad for 2024, everybody. Really bad. And while all this tumult was going on in the House of Representatives, where was the front runner for our nomination and our nominee the last 2 presidential cycles? Was he down in Washington to try to help solve the problem and calm some of his supporters? Was he on the phone desperately trying to whip votes for McCarthy or for somebody else? No. He was in a courtroom defending himself against fraud charges. And by the way, everybody, that's where he's going to be for the next year and a half. There's this case, then there's the January 6th criminal case, then there's the documents criminal case, then there's the criminal case in New York, then there's the criminal case in Georgia. And by the way, with all those criminal cases, it's not optional to show up like on the civil cases right now. As a condition of bail, and remember, he's out on bail in 4 different jurisdictions. He has to be in that courtroom. Not fighting Joe Biden, not fighting the Democrats. What independent voters in this country are going to vote for that? So we better get real about this, and New Hampshire's the place to get real about it. Character matters, it counts. think can carry the day and win independent voters so we can win the White House back. So I'll stop there and take your questions about anything you have on your mind. There's supposedly a microphone right here. There it is.
Yeah, and we will limit the questions to one per person and Rotarians only.
You got it.
Governor, I truly am an independent, and I appreciate the way you have a history of working across the aisle. One of the things I have trouble understanding is the whole border thing. And I'd like just a couple of snippets.
Sure.
What you do about the border and be a humane country that has accepted immigrants for all of our history.
Absolutely. Day one, I signed an executive order that says National Guard troops down to the border to partner with Customs and Border Patrol to stop fentanyl. Job one at the border is to stop as much as we can the flow of drugs that killed 110,000 Americans last year across the border. That's job one on the border. I wanted to put it in perspective for you because I think you have an understanding of what's going on down there. But let's take the last 11 months. In the last 11 months, the average number of apprehensions by Customs and Border Patrol, people illegally coming over the border, is 200,000 a month. Now, you have some of the candidates running who say, well, we're just going to apprehend those people and detain them and send them back to Mexico. Do you know how many detention beds we have available at the border? 38,000. 200,000 a month apprehensions, 38,000 beds. So anybody who stands on this stage and tells you that's the way we're going to fix the problem. I mean, Governor DeSantis says he's going to shoot them stone cold dead as they come over the border. I got to tell you the truth. That's not the America I know. And I would not ask one American military man or woman to indiscriminately shoot people as they come over our border. It's wrong. And as good as it might sound, as tough as it might sound to some people, I'm not doing it. And the reason I'm not doing it is because I'm steeped as our country should be in law and order. I was a prosecutor for 7 years, running the 5th largest office in the country. Here's what we need to do. We need to fix the immigration system so that we incentivize legal immigration and disincentivize illegal immigration. What do I mean? We have 6 million open jobs in this country. 6 million vacant jobs in this economy. Well, what that tells you is those are 6 million jobs that Americans either can't do or won't do. I'm not making a judgment on that. Everybody gets to choose what they want to do or not do with their lives. But we can't grow our economy without filling those jobs. And in your question, you said this. Immigration is what built this country. There may be a couple of Mayflower descendants in this room, but every one of the rest of us are here because one of our descendants immigrated into this country. So I want a merit-based immigration system. I want to say to folks, whether you're from Honduras, El Salvador, Venezuela, whether you're from Europe, whether you're from Asia, here are the open jobs we have, the skill sets you need, and guess what? If you have them, come over. Come over, fill those jobs, pay taxes, and work your way towards citizenship. But only if you come here legally. If you come here illegally, it's not going to happen. We have to do that. We have to stop what we have going on now as quickly as we can by setting up a system where those folks are not incentivized to come marching from El Salvador through Mexico to the United States because you're not getting a job here. But if you come here legally, so let's face it, Mary Pat and I met some folks last week in Arizona who are ranchers. And they also were farms in Iowa. And they said to us, we can't find ranch hands, we can't find farm workers. And that's about food security. Because if we can't do that, we can't be able to produce the food we need, not only to feed our citizens, but to export as we do around the world, to feed others, and to make a profit for our farmers and our ranchers. So I stood on that stage last week when we talked about immigration and heard all these people saying, I'm going to be tough on the border. What's that mean? Ron DeSantis said he's going to deport the 8 million people have come over the border illegally since Biden became president. How? How's he going to do it? Because you know what happened to the majority of those people? They were caught and released and given an asylum hearing date 4 years from now. You think they're showing up? Or you think they're going to already be working somewhere in this country illegally and not want to raise their heads again? So the last piece of the immigration answer is, I would triple the number of immigration judges so that when someone comes in illegally, they get an asylum hearing quickly. And either they are eligible for political asylum, and we bring them in, or they get sent back. But it's not shooting them stone cold dead. And it's not making some ridiculous claims about, I'm going to deport 8 million people. Excuse me, this reminds me of 8 years ago. When they said, when the number was much smaller, they said they were going to bus everybody back. That was Ted Cruz, you might remember. Ted said, you're going to bus everybody back. I had our folks do the math. You would have had to line up school buses back to back from Seattle, get ready, from Seattle all the way to Carmel, California, to fit all the people in that old Ted was going to bus back. Let's stop lying to you. I'm concerned about the border, and I will fix it. But I will fix it in a way where it will actually work. And that's the difference between me and all these other folks that are running. And it's the last part of my answer to your question. Yes, I did come across the aisle. I worked in a blue state. I had to. I had a Democratic legislature for every day of my 8 years. And not with small margins. They had a 10-vote advantage in the Senate. They had a 16-vote advantage in the lower house. I had to figure out how to move them towards my positions and then when to make a deal that made it the best for the people who voted for me. And here's what happened. The result of that, when I won initially, I got 48% of the vote in a 3-person race. 4 years later, in one of the blue states in this country, we haven't elected a United States Senator from our party since 1972. It's the longest streak of any state in the country, 50 years. I got 61% of the vote for re-election, won 70% of independents, 51% of Latinos, 28% of African Americans, and 25% of Democrats. You know the last person nationally to put together that kind of coalition? It was another conservative governor from a blue state. It was Ronald Reagan from California. We need to go back to that formula, and then we'll win the White House again and be able to govern. Yes, sir.
Governor, thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
If I was basing my choice strictly on commercials, you have my vote. However, you being the strongest anti-Trump candidate, and I agree with you on Ukraine and almost every issue, I'm going to ask you to do something that President Reagan would never have asked you to do. Tell me why I should vote for you and not Nikki Haley.
Well, look, let's start where I ended in that last answer. Governor Haley's main experience is being the governor of South Carolina in a red state with a red legislature who basically did whatever she asked him to do. Let me guarantee you this, that is not what she's going to find in Washington, D.C. You need to have the experience to know how to work in that kind of atmosphere. And I'm the only one on the stage that has that experience. You see what it's like down there. We got an absolute bird's eye view 2 days ago of how treacherous it is, how difficult it is, how you have to figure out how to work with the other side. If Kevin McCarthy had figured out how to work with the other side, every Democrat would not have voted against him and kicked him out of the speakership. And I had Democrats who voted for things that I wanted to get done all the time. And you know what the proof of that is? I wouldn't have had anything passed if I didn't. I was 10 votes down in the Senate and 16 votes down in the House. I had to get Democrats to support me. That's the first thing. Second is, look, character matters, as I said before. The fact is, these last two debates, I don't know how illustrative they've been. You watch them. I'm up on stage trying to make a point. And so I'm not the most objective person. But I think the only thing that has mattered in those first two debates was the question in the first debate when they asked, if Donald Trump's a convicted felon, would you still support him? And every person on the stage, except for me and Asa Hutchinson, who's no longer on the stage, raised their hands, including Governor Haley. She said in 2021, she wouldn't even run this time because Donald Trump had been such a great president. Now all of a sudden she's running. But then on the debate stage, she raises her hand and says she'll support his convicted felon. What does she stand for? What's in here? Look, I got booed by 5,000 people in that arena because I wouldn't raise my hand. And I haven't moved an inch, and I won't. And that should tell you something about what kind of president I'll be versus what kind of president she'll be. The wind will blow, and it will blow in my face, just like it did in New Jersey. And if I believe that it's what's right for our country, I will not move. Can't say that about Governor Haley. Next question.
Hi, thanks for being here. By the way, I'm a Jersey girl, born and raised and proud.
Tremendous. Tremendous.
I'll say tomorrow.
All right.
Oh, you know my nephew, Tom Mahoney.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
All right.
So I'm a retired nurse, and you see what's going on now with healthcare. Nurses are leaving. The blame for this, in my opinion, having been in all phases of nursing, is the insurance companies. How are we going to stop this? And the main one is Medicare. Because when Medicare started getting their prices lower, all the insurance companies did the same thing. And they have too much power. I hear more people telling me they can't get in the hospital, or they deny. My husband works at Wentworth Douglas in utilization there. He has to fight insurance companies to get paid. What do we do? Who is going to take care of this? I'm not asking for one insurance and universal. What I'm asking for is fairness.
Right.
And also giving the money to the hospitals instead of insurance companies and CEOs of hospitals and others, and paying them fairly, and then us being taken care of.
Sure. There's a bunch of elements to answer the question, so let me try to go through it quickly. First, is you're absolutely right. Medicare has become much too powerful in this country, and Joe Biden is making it more powerful by saying now pharmaceutical companies are going to negotiate on drug prices with Medicare. Negotiating with Medicare, as you implied, is like negotiating someone with a mask on their face and a gun in their hand. It's no negotiation. They will set prices. And maybe some people will like the price they set, but what they will do is the same thing they've done to the hospital system, is rationing care. Do we want our prescription drugs rationed also? So that this month, maybe you get to the pharmacy at the right time and it's there. And the next month, maybe you get there a little bit later and it's not there. So Medicare cannot be made more powerful. It's got to be made to compete with everybody else. Secondly, on the insurance companies, and the insurance companies, here's the great scam they got going on, because pharmaceutical costs and availability are connected to the insurance companies. How? Because the insurance companies now own all of these pharmacy benefit managers. And these pharmacy benefit managers are just the middlemen between you, the pharmaceutical company, and your local pharmacy. And the insurance companies force you to go to particular pharmacies, force you to pay the prices of those particular pharmacies, and the other things they do is most pharmaceutical companies give rebates on their drugs of anywhere between 30 and 60%. Those rebates are meant for you. You know who takes them? The pharmacy benefit managers, who are owned by the insurance companies. We have to break up the insurance companies and these pharmacy benefit managers, and we need to get the pharmacy managers eliminated. They serve no purpose in this system except to take money from it. Third, we have a shortage of both doctors and nurses in this country. And one of the reasons we have that shortage is because to get the education is too expensive, and once you get the job, you don't get paid enough to be able to pay off the loans that you took to get there. And so we have to approach that in two different ways. One, just like I talked about in the immigration answer of incentivizing people to come to the country to fill certain jobs, we need to lower the cost for those professions that we need to get the education you have to have for it. So, to me, folks who become nurses and doctors are doing a public service. And we need to be able to incentivize them to lower the cost. How are we going to do that? We're going to tell every college and university in this country, if you raise your prices above the rate of inflation, you are eligible for no federal programs of any kind. Let me tell you how quickly education costs would not go up at 4 to 5 times the rate of inflation like they're going at now, and would be reduced and would lower these costs to be able to go and get that education. Secondly, we have to demand hospitals who are involved in the federal system to say you have to pay fair wages to your doctors and nurses. You have to do better than what you're doing. And I think if we get the insurance companies and Medicare out of squeezing them to get more profits, the money is there. We spend more money on health care in this country than any country in the world. We just have to reapportion where that money goes. And to me, it should go to the people who are actually providing the care, the hospitals, the doctors, and the nurses, and not this exorbitant profit to insurance companies and pharmacy benefit managers who really are one and the same. Because if you look at, imagine the scam they've got going on right now. One of the insurance companies owns the pharmacy benefit managers and owns CVS. What a great gig, if you can get it, right? The only people you don't own in that entire process are the pharmaceutical companies. And guess who the insurance companies are spending most of their money lobbying against in Washington, D.C.? The pharmaceutical companies. To blame them for the high cost of prescription drugs, even though they're eating up most of the rebates that the pharmaceutical companies give to lower the cost of prescriptions. We know, and it's the best question I've gotten in healthcare so far in this campaign because it's from someone who's in it. So you understand what the scam is here. And that's the scam. You put your finger on the insurance companies and the PBMs as the ones who are doing it. And if I'm president, we're breaking apart that monopoly and we're making them, along with Medicare, compete for our business. And the one who gives you the best coverage at the most affordable price is going to get your business, not the ones you get shoved into because you reach a certain age or you live in a certain place in the country. So either geographically or demographically, you get forced to accept a certain kind of health care that limits you. We spend more than enough not to have to do that. And on the other side, we have to deal with the labor supply issue much differently. And guess what? The way to do that is the way this country's always done it. If you pay people more, they're more incentivized to go toward that than if you don't. And especially for nurses, you saw during COVID how extraordinarily important nursing care was. And guess what happened when there was a shortage of nursing care then? They paid more, didn't they? All the money they said they couldn't afford to pay, all of a sudden they pay anything to get a nurse in the door at that point. And so it shows that the system works if we incentivize it the right way. So that's the way I would go about doing it.
Governor, thank you for coming this afternoon, and sorry to back you up a little bit from what you said about not supporting Donald Trump. However, my question is, if you become president, will you pardon Donald Trump?
No, I will not. Unless I thought that we were doing his trial. Only way I would is if I looked at the reviewed trial and thought that it had been completely unfair. I don't think that's going to happen. No, because in the end, the pardon power is about two things, right? The pardon power is about reversing an unjust result. But here's the reason that I won't want the pardon, because there's two elements. You have to say that the result was unjust, and the person must take responsibility for their conduct. The chances of that are lower than zero. Lower than zero. And I will not pardon him because he would have to look me in the eye and say to me, I was wrong. What I did was wrong. It was awful for our country and the American people, and I'm sorry. And by the way, he'd have to look at me and do it, and he'd have to say it publicly to all of you. And let me tell you, I've known it for 22 years. Yeah, me too. You've got a better chance of hitting Powerball tonight. Than you. I hope you do, because I want somebody that I've actually met to get the $1.4 billion. That would actually be really cool. But you have a better chance of hitting Powerball tonight than that. So no, I would not pardon Donald Trump. But by the way, you've got folks on that stage. Vivek Ramaswamy has said every one of us should pledge today, before there's been a trial or anything else, to pardon him. Ask those folks whether they agreed to do that or not. Because I guarantee you that most of them have. Because they're afraid of him. Well, here's one thing. We have a Jersey girl back there. You know, people from New Jersey have been used to dealing with obnoxious people from New York for a long time.
This will be the last question.
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Given the current polarization of the Republican Party right now, what would President Christie do to unite this party back together without fracturing it even more?
Look, I think part of the... Let's say you even listen to some of the ridiculous arguments that were going back and forth on the floor of the House of Representatives a couple of days ago. A lot of the argument is about the fact that we haven't accomplished anything. Now, the reason the arguments were ridiculous is because each side was blaming each other for that and taking no responsibility themselves for it, even though everybody has a piece of the responsibility that serves down there. I think part of the way you bring the party back together is to actually start accomplishing something that they can go and take credit for. Look, that's why I would never be in Congress. Okay? Someone, Bob, you might have read that one of our United States senators in New Jersey is in a little bit of trouble. Apparently, $500,000 in cash and gold bars in your house when the FBI comes. Having done that for 7 years, that's a problem. And immediately I got called and asked, will I run for the United States Senate? I couldn't function in that environment, right? It's just not for me, because I like to get things done. But we need to give them things to go and take credit for, because they want to stay in office, they want to show some progress. So the first thing is to be able to say to people, here is a practical set of things that we can actually get done. Let's get it done together and watch how people are going to react if we do. They're going to actually be more than mildly stunned. And even if they don't agree with all of it, they're going to be gratified that the government's actually doing something. Right now we take a victory lap for not closing the government down. Right? And that's the huge accomplishment. Oh, they're going for another 45 days. Let's give them all a medal. Right? So first thing is, you bring the party together by accomplishing this. Second is, can we start talking about this country again in a way that's aspirational? Can we start talking about how great this country is and could be even greater? Rather than always moaning, complaining, yelling, angry. Look, I'm from New Jersey, so we kind of are born with a certain amount of anger. It's true, because we're stuck between New York and Philadelphia. Benjamin Franklin used to say New Jersey's okay, it's happening at two ends. Right? So we have a bit of a chip on our shoulder, but even for me, this has become ridiculous. This anger and grievance politics. This is the greatest country in the world. We talked about immigration before. People are dying, literally dying to come here because of the hope that we offer. We're not talking that way anymore. We're an inspiration to the rest of the world, or at least we used to be. I think we bring our party back together again by talking about the things that Ronald Reagan used to talk about and made us feel great about ourselves and our country and made the world feel great about us. We are a shining city on the hill. This is the freest place in the world. This is the place of greatest opportunity in the world. This is the most educated populace in the world, with the greatest opportunity to be educated. This is a place that stands up for right. We need to be talking about that as a party again, instead of talking about what we can't do. Oh, we can't help Ukraine because we need to fix the southern border. Well, we can do both, and we should do both. When Ronald Reagan said the Soviet Union was an evil empire, I said, I'm going to stand up against it, and he's going to ask all of us to sacrifice to do it. There were lots of people in this country who thought he was like a cowboy who was going to get us into war, and said, what happened? 10 years later, after standing up and being strong, Soviet Union was gone. Gone. Now, we've done this over and over again in our country. Go all the way back to the Revolution. If they had taken a poll in 1776, independents would have won. Independents would have been down about 2-1. let's sacrifice and do better, and we did. So they did it. They give it away to the South. He said a house divided against itself can't stand. We have to work together. And if we have to fight to get there, we will. And we came out of that stronger and freer than we've ever been. And Franklin Roosevelt asked us to sacrifice in World War II. And we didn't want to put Nazis at our doorstep. We wound up setting up the world for the greatest period of freedom and peace that it's had in its history. That's America doing that. No other nation can do that. And the president needs to start talking about that again and talking like that again. I'm sorry, I don't want to hear another inaugural speech about, how grim things are, about American carnage. I know what we need to do on law and order, and we're going to do it. If I'm president, we're going to send the federal prosecutors in this country into some of these cities like Seattle and Portland and Chicago and Los Angeles and San Francisco and New York, and say to those local prosecutors, if you won't prosecute violent crime, we will. I've done it. I know how to do it, and we will do it. So I know we have problems. But the way you bring people together is to call us to our better angels, to call us to the things that in our heart we know are true about this country. And we haven't had a president do that in a long time. George W. Bush was the last one who did it right after 9/11, and he had an unbelievable, horrible event to call us together. We haven't been together since then. And by the way, that's partially his fault. It's Barack Obama's fault, it's Donald Trump's fault, and it's Joe Biden's fault. Every one of them got elected and had an opportunity to use that election to bring us together and to accomplish things. Instead, each one of them decided to divide us further for their own political advantage. I'll end with this. When I did the budget stuff I talked about before, I eliminated 683 programs. My approval ratings went from the mid-50s to the mid-30s. And I had a bunch of the press in New Jersey say, well, obviously, this guy doesn't care about a second term because he's doing all this stuff and his numbers go way down. And I said to them at the time, I don't care about a second term. I intend to be a governor of consequence. And these things need to be done. We're already overtaxed. I'm not raising taxes anymore. And we're going to do this because it's the right thing to do. And they said, yeah, come on, you're a politician. Of course you want a second term. I said, I didn't want one. I said I didn't care. It wasn't going to push my confidence. You know why? Because I already get the portrait. You get elected once. You get the portrait, and they were going to paint a portrait of me and hang it in the State House for the rest of the time. When Mary Pat and I someday are lucky enough, I hope, to have grandchildren, they're going to be able to go there and say, the old man wasn't always nuts. Look, he actually did something. They painted a portrait of him. What I explain to folks is, all you're arguing about once that happens is the little brass plaque at the bottom, whether it says 4 years or 8 years. I'm not selling my soul for an additional 4 years. I want to do things of consequence. And that's the way I would act as president. There will be difficult things to be done, and political capital is accumulated to be expended on things of consequence. That a president is not purely focused on himself and his own political future, but is focused on your future and doing the right thing for the people who actually elected you. That's what happened in New Jersey, and guess what? I did get the other 4 years. And the brass plaque has all 8 years on it. And that's really nice. And it's a portrait that I actually don't mind. Which, if you look like me, means it was an extraordinary artist who was very generous and did a really great job for me. Look, in Hampshire, and people ask me, why am I spending all this time in New Hampshire? Because you guys are first. And you're not a caucus, you're a primary. Everybody who wants to participate can participate. Everybody thinks this is inevitable. Whether you're happy about it, unhappy about it, if Donald Trump is inevitable, he is not. And you're the ones who get to decide. Because if you send a message on primary night that we can do better, that we don't have to accept this, This is not something we have to live with. All of the anger and the BS every day on that stupid Truth Social thing. Anger he's spewing out every day. Poor him, poor him, poor him, poor him. The best answer is he says he's gotten indicted for us. Hell, man, I didn't see any of you do any of that stuff. It was all him. He did it. He's not standing in between you and anything. The only thing that's in between Donald Trump and you is a mirror. That's all he cares about. To look at himself. We need a president who's not going to do that anymore. Who's going to say the most important thing is to move the mirror out of the way and look at you and your children and your grandchildren and say, when they read about me later in life as president, what do I want them to learn? What do I want them to know? And what I would want them to know is that I served for a period of time to try to make their lives better, but I told them the truth and I did the very best I could every day. For them, not for me. So you have a chance to do it. All of you. And I don't want this defeatism. I don't want this, we have to accept this. Oh, I'm too small to change this. I stood on that stage in Milwaukee and got booed because I told the truth. That this conduct by someone who's been fortunate enough to be president of the United States is unacceptable. That no matter what else you might like about what he did when he was president, you can get that and have somebody you can point your children and grandchildren to and say, that's someone to emulate. That's someone to be proud of. Would you ever tell any of your kids to be like that? That's the question, everybody. If we fail that question, nothing else will work. Nothing. That's the way you bring the party together. But more importantly, that's the way you bring the country together. We will always argue with each other. We will always fight with each other. That's what this country was set up to be. It was set up to be an argument. But an argument that leads to a result. Not an argument just to argue. We're up here. Mary Pat and I are up here because we believe in our hearts that we can do that in partnership with the people in this country. And you all, before anybody else, are going to get to decide. And you're either going to show that there's a new way for America, or we're going to nominate two guys who are 160 years old combined. Right? And with all due respect, are both past their sell-by date to be president of the United States. Just true. We all know it. Father time always wins. Always. And at the end, it's not only by their age, but by their conduct. Trump regularly lies to us, and Biden has too. Because when he ran 3 years ago, he said he was going to bring us together. Instead, he ran far to the left to assuage that part of his party. We deserve better. I want to try to give you better. And I'm here today because I want you to hear directly from me. That's the way I'll do it, and I hope you'll be with me. So thank you for having me today. Sorry for